So let's go ahead and let's bring in a score. Let's see. We'll auto out. So right here we have this score coming in. And let's say we want to drive this score. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into View and go to the Scoreboard tool. So here's the Scoreboard tool. And the great thing is that it has a clock happening. If I click this clock right here, you see the clock's counting down in the screen. If I had another clock, maybe a shot clock for basketball or what have you, I have this other clock I can drive. And you can see it's counting down right there in the main screen. If I have the need for them to both be linked at the same time, I can click right here and they're both linked. A lot of flexibility. Clock 1 and clock 2 are simply the name variables that you give those pieces of text, and all of a sudden they get associated with the clock. So remember in the object tab where we typed in like new text, right, as the label, we would type in clock 1, and that would start driving the numbers of that piece of text in the design. We have the digit count, how many digits you have, total time. You can count up. You can reset at the end. You can hide it when not running. So if we did, let's say the clock number 2, maybe it's a power play, for example. Hide when not running. So see, it's no longer in the design, but then when we go to play, it appears, and then we pause, it hides again. So, a lot of great things you can do there. Now, this, of course, is the home score, visitor score. You can increment the scores really easily. Let's say you accidentally incremented a little too far. You didn't want to give them 15 points. You wanted to give them 14 points. Well, you can type a new value in and then hit enter, and that new value shoots right out there. So the great thing about the scoreboard tool is that everything you do here is just automatically going live as soon as you hit enter in that tool. So, visitor score, we want to give them 7, enter, or use the increment numbers to do that. Now, there's a lot of variables in this template, as I was showing you, right? There's the visitor logo, the home logo, the visitor name, the home name. You don't want to be looking at all those things. You wouldn't want to work with this interface just for the clock and then run over this other interface for possession and things like that, right?
Right. Yep.
So exactly. So the great thing is you can promote variables from the template. So let's click this right here, and here's all the variables from the template we're working on. So I don't care about the image. We already know it's Taco Bell or what have you, right? I'm not going to be changing the visitor and home names during the game or their logos, but I do want to mess with period, possession, timeouts, and I don't want to do the colors right now. So I'm going to click OK. Now I've promoted these variables into this tool. So I could actually hide the Tyler Pro Live interface, and let's say, you know what? I'm sitting at my computer, and all I'm concerned about is driving that scoreboard correctly.
That's cool.
So, yeah, so we can pick what possession's happening here, reduce by a timeout. It's first and down, money, yeah, and down, enter, and now I have the text right here in the scoreboard. So we can be driving the clocks and everything that can be done from the scoreboard tool. So it's very versatile. And the great thing is that you get to make up any variable you want.
Right. Where do you push the changes? Is there a refresh button in this console, or
when you're using the scoreboard tool? When I type, second and down, and hit enter, that's when it goes.
All at once.
Right.
Got it. Yeah, you're generating a lot of questions here in the chat about this, so that's very cool. I think people are pretty excited about this.
Well, let's go to some of the questions then.
Yeah, so let's start with one. This is a good one for everyone to know. How much CPU usage does Tyler Pro take up? Do you have any minimum specs recommended to run this type of stuff?
We do have some minimum specifications, and it's not really CPU oriented, actually. It has a lot to do with your graphics card. This is a 3D graphics application. So we do recommend that you have a decent graphics card in the tool that you're using. We do work with Intel integrated graphics, and that'll get you by, but the richer graphics you do, it's 4500 and above, Intel HD 4500 and above. But it is really recommended that you have a dedicated graphics solution like an NVIDIA or an AMD. Depending on how heavy the graphics you're doing, we would recommend a whole gig of video RAM for that graphics card. So that's kind of that's a component that really is important to, you know, fluid work with Tyler Pro Live.
That makes sense. I mean, and that was actually ties into a couple other questions that people had. Was there a model you recommended of video cards? I mean, I typically go say, you know, get, you know, an NVIDIA GeForce class card or a Radeon class card made in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Try to get one with at least a gig of video RAM, and that generally gets people one that's powerful enough to do most of the things they ask it to do. But of course, it depends on how many displays you're driving and just how complicated your effects are, how many layers and composites you throw in there. So
and to be very clear, we're not talking about industrial grade graphics cards by any means.
Right,
we're talking about a fun gaming card.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, you know, for a couple $100, you should be pretty well set with one that can handle just about everything we're throwing at it. So that's a great question. And actually, everything is GPU accelerated, right?
That's right.
That's great. That one came from Scott. Another question, this kind of goes from Stanley. He's actually, do you have swimming graphics? I'll let you answer that.
You know, we have not shipped some swimming templates, but if you get the Tyler Pro Live 2 Advance, you can modify any of these templates to do swimming yourself. And actually a piece, we kind of ran out of time. One thing I didn't do is I didn't import a PSD file. You can, let's say you've already been doing sports for a while and you've been doing still sports, you know, because often that's been the offerings that are available for Wirecast customers, right? Just a still graphic popping up.
Right.
And let's say you have a Photoshop document of your graphic that was like maybe your nice background. You can import that into Title Designer and use that as your background material. You could even slice it up into different Photoshop layers and animate them independently. So, you know, there's a really, really powerful way that I have to show you, actually.
All right. Yeah. Why don't you show us? That's pretty cool. I mean, you've got a Photoshop file. I mean, everyone's familiar. That's kind of standard, you know, graphics editor everyone needs to kind of create their images in. So if you can just pull that in with the layers and animate those independently, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so let's go into, let's say, where did I have? I think I had a folder that just had text. Yeah, all right. So I'm going to drag and drop this down and see all this text right here. So this is actually straight from Harvard. G-Town versus Harvard, and there's a couple scores here, and we're working with those guys.
Nice.
And we'll go into Title Designer. So you see all those elements right there?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I have kind of incorporated all these different timeouts, visitor score, all into a group. So there's groups in here. Didn't want to get into the nitty gritty. But let's go ahead and go File, Import PSD, and we'll go to our folder here, and let's see. Let's do this one, I think is the right one. Keep layers in one paragraph, or import each layer as a separate. Let's keep it all as one paragraph. All right, so here we go. Here is a background that, if I size it down a little bit and kind of line it up with my text in front, right?
Mm-hmm.
Use my alt and arrows to scoot things around. I think I need to size it down just a little bit more. Lesson of a demo artist: remember your values.
Yeah, always.
All right, you get the point here, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, fine. So you got that. Let's say we have that there, and this is our background, right? Let's go into the library, and we could go into some of our transitions. In fact, we have additional transition collections called fluid and kinetic motion packs, and so you could use some fun things there, like a swinging text maybe. And I could just hover over some of the swinging text, and let's see, bottoms up, or let's say flourish letters. So I can drag and drop this down, and look what happens. See how these different panels come into place?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the reason is because on this PSD layer, I have these different layers. You know, part of that PSD, I broke it up in Photoshop before I brought it in.
Mm-hmm.
So each of these acts like a different letter, getting its own animation. So if I didn't use a swing text, maybe I'll pick something a little more obvious. Let's go into our transitions infinity, let's say, and we'll use letter by letter. There we go. Go ahead and drag that down, maybe shorten our transition a little bit. And so now kind of from the different
they all
distance,
pop in, right?
Right, they all pop in, right?
Nice. And that was all a single Photoshop file.
That's all a single Photoshop file with different layers in it.
That's great. I had another question, just from what I'm watching is, what would you say, the learning curve is on this? Like, how long do you feel it takes people to get comfortable with the tools that you've shown today?
What I would say is that we keep getting feedback of people being surprised at how little effort it was to get going. So I think everyone out there, and this is something that we really have to work against with tutorials and things like that, people just assume that,
just in a sub menu. So that's pretty cool. Well, let's grab a few more questions. So Travis, first question for you comes from Nevin, and he's wondering, can you automate scoreboard data from an in-venue board, like a Daktronics scoreboard or something?
Right. Currently today, you're not able to. However, that is close on the heels. So it's in our roadmap. We're working with a number of technologies that source that data, and so be looking out for news coming out of NewBlue when we hook up to some of these systems that does bring that scoreboard information in remotely.
All right. Next question comes from Ben, and he's wondering, can variables be fed with external data sources? So via an API or a text file, JSON file?
And that's actually another form of the same question, really.
Yeah.
So you know how we had the scoreboard tool? We created that really as an input. So it is generating data and forwarding it to variable fields, and those variable fields get rendered in the design. So in the same way that we are towards having some scoreboard connections, we're also working towards other offerings as well. So be looking out for example, a Twitter feed input. Be looking out for just other kinds of inputs of that nature. So what we do want to know, though, is like, these are excellent questions. We want to know, what kind of inputs are you guys looking for? And so you can help prioritize our efforts to